Anyway, number 2, I got email number 2 here, Brian. And this is from Andrew. And we talked about Tony Khan and on one of the episodes, which he quotes here, and this was the discussion he was referring to. Actually, hello, Jim. And Brian, I guess you're implied.
I guess.
I was listening to your thoughts on Tony Khan on episode 263, and you mentioned how you don't know why Tony Khan would not hand off booking duties to someone else. And I have a theory. Tony Khan created AEW to book wrestling. He never created AEW to make money. He's already filthy rich. Tony Khan created AEW because his lifelong dream was to book wrestling. He is a billionaire, and AEW is his toy, the same way a regular Joe would create a fantasy league team, etc. Tony Khan is doing the same thing, but because of his wealth, he can do it on a grander scale. He is not going to hand off AEW booking to anyone else, because then what is the point of him owning a wrestling company if he doesn't get to book it?
That's right. That's right.
He created AEW to play wrestling booker. The moment it stops being fun for him is when he'll hand off the bookings. And the average fan on the street, well, I don't know if Andrew's a streetwalker, but he's the average fan out in the wild, out in public, in their native habitat, and he sees it. And you're telling me that all these wrestlers who are getting a check from Tony Khan can't see it, when the fans can see it, but they can't say it. But they will go, oh, Tony is a wonderful friend and booker and confidant.
Well, look, I think the point of that email is something I've been saying too. And for good or for bad, and it's not for good or for bad about Tony, just the fact it was created to be Tony's plaything. That's the only reason it exists. It wouldn't have existed. It wouldn't have been like, you know what? I think wrestling is a profitable enterprise. I want to go into it. Let's create a wrestling portfolio and have someone run it. It was, I want to do this. I've always wanted to do this. I've been training my whole life to do this. I want to do this. That's the reality of what AEW is and why it exists.
He's been training his whole life. He's been training himself his whole life.
In his head, I'm saying what he's thinking, and that is, I've been training my whole life.
That's like if you go to a guy and say, hey, you want to be a porn star? And he says, well, okay, I'm a virgin, but I've been jacking off all my life. Again, and let's say he wanted to be benevolent as far as the wrestling industry in general. He felt like, yes, they're these poor put upon wrestlers. They need a place to go into work so they don't have to sell their soul to Vince or whatever. Then he still could have used his connections and his money to set it up and hire people that were experienced and knowledgeable to administer. Even if he didn't want to make a profit, if he just wanted to do this purely in a benevolent enterprise for the wrestling business and all these hardworking wrestlers out there. But he didn't do that either. You're exactly right, you prognosticator, the only reason that he did this was so that he could finally be a booker, like he's been in his mind since he was a teenager. Anyway.
And again, for good or for bad, because there are people who love AEW for what it is, and that's Tony's vision. But that's the reality of it. And that's going to be the interesting thing, the other point that the email had. What happens if we get to a point ever where Tony, I don't know if bored is the right word, but recognizes...
Burn out, cracked up, rubber room at the puzzle factory?
Well, recognizing that he's burned out. Because they're going to have to drag him away from this. And I'm not saying anyone's going to do that, but that's what it would take. More than likely, it's his baby. It's his project. His hands are all over it, from the music to the entire television show. It's all him. Does more interviews than any fucking promoter I've ever seen in my life. Every day there's another image of him talking to some random podcaster out there. It's all about him. That's why he's in the center of every press scrum. It's a Tony Khan project, and it's more than likely not going to go away. And I think that's why the goal for people should be for Tony to get better at this, because he's not going to step down. There's no All right, I've had enough. I'm handing over everything. Here's George Scott or whatever. There's nothing like that.
Okay, well, this brings up an interesting thought. Let's say, Brian Last, you are a promising rookie wrestler. You've got tool, size, ability, looks, you can talk. There's reason to believe that you could be somewhat of a star in this business, right? And you've got the choice of two places to go. And now it's the WWE, who not only is not any longer being run by Vince McMahon, who had driven a wedge in between the company and many of today's modern superstars because he was crazy and made LA Knight, Max Dupree, and all this other stuff that we talked about. But he's not there anymore. Now it's Triple H, who's a wrestling guy, who was the NXT guy. But also, even if you don't want to go to work for Triple H, or even if you want to, but you're not just going to work for Triple H, you're going to work for Nick Khan, the big Hollywood wheeler-dealer deal maker. You're going to work for a publicly traded company that's worth $5 billion that ain't going to go out of business. You're working for a company that has still international reach and, broadcast platforms, whatever. They ain't going anywhere. Whether you become a star is still up in the air like it is with everybody. But that company is only going to be sold to a major media conglomerate in its future. It's not fucking folding up or limping along or going out of business or whatever. I think we can all acknowledge that, right?
Right.
On the other side, what happens if you sign with AEW and Tony Khan, who is still a young man, but from the looks of him, he's aging either physically or mentally from the last 3 years. He's more frazzled. He's more peripatetic and erratic. And even if Tony was the rock of stability, if he gets hit by a bus, if he has a stroke, if he comes down with some type of illness or just mentally gets fried, who takes over? Where does it go from there? Who's running this thing? Megan? Is Megan going to be the new booker?
Her name is Mega, not Megan.
It's not my fault. Her parents didn't know how to spell.
They spelled it just right. The name is Mega.
Or is she going to be the one to pick the new booker? Or is there a plan in place? Has Tony Khan written out, if I get hit by a rainbow bread truck tomorrow, run over in the street, this is who should be in charge of everything? He
did write that, but from what I understand, it looks like it's in Chris Jericho's handwriting.
Well, see, there you go. And then there's going to be like the Howard Hughes will. It's like, do the Mormons, are they in on this? Does Clifford Irving have a say in it? Whatever the fuck, right? So that's the point I'm making. You've got now the chance to either go to work for a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company that is as stable as it can be in the world of wrestling, and Triple H is there, but even if something happens to him and he has a bad heart, there are multiple layers of people in place at every turn that can hop right in, as we've just seen. And meanwhile, over on the other side of the street, if anything happens to, even if something doesn't happen to Tony, do you want to take a good look at him at the media scrum, folks, at 2:00 in the morning and say, well, I trust him with my life and career. But even if you do, what happens if something happens to him? Who's running it? Where do they go? Who steps in to write the show? Has this been clearly delineated ahead of time, or is it now going to be a big fucking King of the Hill party to see which of the EVPs or the new mentor, Plumber Moxley, or Scene Stealer, Chris Jericho, or my God, what the fuck, right? So are people starting to think about that? It's a question I'm asking.
Well, you asked me if I was the wrestler, what I would do.
Yes, I did. Long ago, I asked you that, didn't I?
So let's play with that for a second. If I was this wrestler, how old am I? In this hypothetical, in this hypothetical with chef crafted recipes in the catering.
If you're an aspiring wrestler with some level of talent, and you're a couple of years either way of 25 years old.
Do I have a head on my shoulders? Am I smart enough to recognize what to do?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I would hope so. We're not talking about what would stupid people do.
Right. Okay. But hey, there aren't a lot of main eventers with a good head on their shoulders. So it's the reality of wrestling sometimes. Am I getting a similar offer from both sides?
Oh, God damn it. Now you're really going into detail. All right, let's say that it is similar. It is within the range of reason. Both things are approximately equal.
More than likely NXT to start or AEW. I'm guessing not just dark, more than likely the main roster. Here's the reality of it. You have to look at what you want and where it could happen. If you're looking to become a main eventer and make a lot of money, with AEW, if you're a wrestling fan who's a wrestler, you're going to have the greatest conversations with Tony before you sign. You're going to fall in love with him because you can geek out on wrestling and talk about stuff, and he knows his shit. He's watched it all. He knows it. So you'll love the conversations with him. It'll open you up to the idea of going to AEW and working for someone like Tony. With WWE, you're not going to really get that kind of feel. With Triple H, it'll be a different thing altogether. With the idea that eventually you're going to get to Triple H, I don't know who you'll deal with first. There'll probably be layers of people before you get to Triple H sometimes. I see with WWE and looking at who are Triple H's guys from NXT that they're bringing up and looking at the stars that are there that are aging out, I would see a clear path to becoming a main eventer. If I had size and I could talk and I was smart and I could put up with a year and a half, 2 years of complete bullshit with the booking and everything. There's a path there to main eventing WrestleMania. With AEW, there's a path to making good money. You'll have an easier schedule. What's the expression? With chaos, there's opportunity. There is the chance to be a main eventer there. It would really depend on how I wanted to control my own destiny. If I wanted to make a bunch of money and I wasn't going to worry about the booking or anything, I just wanted the main event, I would go to WWE. If I wanted to be hyper involved in everything, I would go to AEW. I'd probably be frustrated, but that's what I would do.
Well, but here's the problem there, pal. The young aspiring prospects don't seem to be the ones to be able to get hyper involved. You already have to be some level of name to start calling some of your shots. Because we've seen Tony's notorious for not knowing how to start guys and not knowing how to present unfamiliar talent on television on a regular basis in an upward trajectory on the weekly television program to get them more over 3 months after they come into the company than they are the night they come into company. So it's almost like if you come in there and you're not some level of name, that's when you get thrown in they get over by accident and Tony doesn't know what to do with them. It's the top guys that have some, levels of input into what they're doing. But
if I was a wrestler who wanted to be involved,
they're already somebody.
Right. If I was a young wrestler, if I was like an MJF, if MJF was in WWE, he wouldn't have been able to be as creative as he's been in AEW. Right? Would you agree with that?
If MJF hadn't had the fucking buzz and the attention and the conversation about him that he did before he came to AEW, I bet you he wouldn't have had as much input as he's had from the start as well.
So let me ask you a situation like this, and this is completely hypothetical. Wardlow's contract comes up. He's got equal money offered on both sides. What do you do?
I can tell you in a heartbeat, Wardlow, you wouldn't like living in Connecticut, but you don't have to work in the office. You can live anywhere in the country you want and work for the WWE. And Wardlow's goal, especially with what's been done to him over the last 3 months, should be to get the fuck to the WWE as quickly as possible. He has the size. He has the look. He can talk enough now that he'll get better. And that is a tailor-made place for them to get him over if they were interested. And I don't know why they wouldn't be with his various attributes. and they would know more focused, a more focused approach than bringing him out on television and the people going crazy for him, and then him winning a program and then either hiding him or teaming him up with multiple other people. Or the other night, they put him in a match with fucking Brian Cage, who physically makes him look less impressive and is so rotten, which, as we'll talk about that program here in a little while, just diminishes the guy even when he's beating him. The people get up now for the power bombs, not as much as they were, but they're still up for those. They were goddamn molten for the power bombs 3 months ago. Now they still like them, but they're making the fans fucking trudge through goddamn high water to get to the power bombs with Wardlow. There's no focus. There's no plan. He's just been bouncing back and forth, doing fuck all of shit. And that, I can't believe, if they want to get a guy over in the WWE, they'll get him over. As evidenced by some of the guys they want to get over, you can't fucking get away from them on their television.
Or like the way Tony uses Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia.
Well, yes, you can't get away from them, even no matter how hard you try.
Imagine if Wardlow got that push.
Imagine if Wardlow was out there fucking kicking the shit out of ex-WWE world champions.
Well, that was the email about Tony Khan. That went a while.
That certainly was. Anyway,